The world of exercise can be confusing. We all have so many questions about what we're supposed to be doing. And I think one of the most common questions people tend to ask is, how many sets and reps am I meant to do of this exercise? And a quick search on YouTube or scroll through social media might just leave you with more questions than actual answers. Now, I've been training for 2 decades now, and I've been coaching in some capacity for almost just as long. And so if I still find the topic a little bit confusing, if I still find loads of conflicting information, I can only imagine how you feel trying to find those answers. So I'm going to do my best to answer that question for you today. How many sets and reps should you be doing for your exercises?
What are we waiting for?
The sets and reps that you do for your exercises are probably less important than you think they are. Despite what you may have been told, despite the myths that certainly have been circulating since I first started training, there are no magical rep or set schemes that will lead to muscle growth or getting stronger. Which sounds a bit silly because as a personal trainer, as an online coach, I spend most of my days prescribing sets and reps for my clients. But I tell them the same thing, it's less important than they think. You might see prescriptions for 5x5, 10x10 German volume training, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 12, 4 sets of 6. Obviously, you don't get anyone prescribing sets of 7 or 9 or 11 or 13 reps because that would be breaking the rules. But if the sets and reps that you are doing don't matter as much as you think they do, then what does matter? Fundamentally, the most important part when it comes to building muscle is that the sets you are doing are taken very close to or to muscular failure. And so long as on average you're staying between 5 to 20 reps, it probably doesn't make a huge difference in the end. That means that if you go and do a set of barbell bench press and you do a set of 5 and on the 5th rep you reach muscular failure, that's going to be a good stimulus for building muscle. It also means if you use a weight that allows you to get 20 repetitions and around the 20th repetition you also get to muscular failure, that set is also going to be really good stimulus for building muscle. Of course, nobody does 20 rep sets on barbell bench press. I'm just using it as an example. But what the evidence seems to indicate is that anything within that rep range can be an effective rep range for building muscle. But what matters is not the specific number you get to. What matters is, like I said, you get very close to or to muscular failure. And so if someone says that 3 sets of 10 builds muscle, they're not wrong, they're right. So long as those 3 sets of 10 are taken very close to or to muscular failure. If you do 3 sets of 10 with a weight that you could have done 20 repetitions with, then none of those sets are going to be particularly effective at building muscle. If you use a weight that just about allows you to get 10 repetitions on each set, fantastic. Those 3 sets were all super effective. A good way to think about this is if you've ever been to a body pump class or you've walked by them in the gym and you've seen them going, you will often see large groups of people all with a single barbell or 1 or 2 dumbbells that are usually very light. And they will do sets of 10, 15 or 20 of multiple exercises straight for 30 to 45 minutes. And so they are doing 3 sets of 10, they are doing sets of 20, they are doing a lot of work and a lot of volume. Volume, by the way, is usually worked out by the reps times the sets times the weight. So 1 set of 10 repetitions with 10 kilos would be 100 kilos. But these classes are not good, or at least they're not effective at building muscle. They're great to get a sweat on. They're great for getting your heart rate up. They're great for burning calories. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't do those classes. But if you're doing exercise for the purpose of building muscle, they don't work because none of those sets are taken close to failure. If they did, the classes wouldn't last very long because you just burn out super, super quick. And so that's why getting hung up on specific reps and sets, if you're trying to build muscle, is doing yourself a disservice. If you go to do 3 sets of 12 and you pick up a pair of dumbbells and you go to do some dumbbell bench press and you decide at the beginning of that set that what you need to do is do 12 repetitions, not what you need to do is take that set close to failure. If you get to that 12th repetition and stop and you could have done 15, that set is probably not very effective at building muscle. Whereas if you'd gone past 12 and you'd done 13, 14 or 15 repetitions, that set would have been far more effective. Essentially, you want to finish your working sets with nothing more than 2 reps left in the tank ideally. And so the reality is that sets and reps matter far less than you think. There's nothing magical about 5 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 10. What matters is the effort within those sets. People get bigger and stronger doing sets of 5 and 6 reps. People get bigger and stronger doing sets of 15 to 20. Some of it will come down to preference. Some of it will come down to the exercise. Most of us will probably find that doing higher repetitions on isolation work feels a little bit better, and I'm perfectly happy to accept that. There's not really any science that says you need to do high repetitions for tricep pushdowns on a cable. It just feels better to do sets of 10, 12, 15 rather than sets of 5 or 6 repetitions. The opposite is also true with big, heavy compound lifts. A true set of 20 repetitions of squats to absolute muscular failure, if done well with heavy weight, is probably going to wipe you out for the next 10 or 15 minutes because there is just such a huge demand upon your whole body. The fatigue is so great. Your heart rate is going to be through the roof. You're going to be out of breath. Your lower back's going to be on fire. And so for hypertrophy purposes, doing big compound movements with the lower rep ranges between, sort of 5 to 10, again, makes more sense. But it's not that you should use lower reps with compound movements, and it's not that you should use higher reps with isolation movements. It's just that it kind of makes more sense and it tends to fit better for most of us most of the time. That being said, if you want to do 5 rep max preacher curls, then by all means crack on. So if sets and reps don't matter as much as we think they do for building muscle, then why do personal trainers, why do online coaches, why do content creators, why do people online even suggest them to start with? Well, you need some guidelines. You need something to aim for. And you also need something to judge your progress by and decide whether you need to increase the weight or the reps. So for example, I might write in a client's program, I want them to do 3 sets of an exercise for between 6 to 10 repetitions. Now that doesn't include their warm-ups, that doesn't include their practice. That's 3 working sets of dumbbell bench press, let's say. And their aim is to do 3 sets between 6 to 10 repetitions, and each set should be between 0 to 1 reps in reserve. But what I tell them, and what I would like you to know as well, is that those are guidelines, not rules. They're not prescriptions. You don't have to hit 6 and you don't have to stop at 10. Let's say, for instance, on your 3rd set, you decide to go a little bit lighter. You did 2 sets of 6 reps and 7 reps, and you reckon you had at most 1 rep in the tank with 30 kilo dumbbells. And you decide on your 3rd run you're going to go a little bit lighter and see if you can get closer to 10 repetitions. So you pick up a pair of 25s. The first 7 or 8 reps are an absolute breeze, the 9th rep is a little bit slow, the 10th repetition is kind of a bit of a grind, but you think you've got a couple of reps in the tank still. What I would do in that situation, and what I encourage my clients to do, is actually to keep going. I know the program says 3 sets of 6 to 10, but like I said, they are guidelines. If they get to that 10th repetition, if you get to that 10th repetition and you feel like you got a few reps in the tank, do a couple more. You don't have to get to failure, but I want you to get to the point where you feel like you've only got 1, maybe 2 reps left in the tank. And so they make a note on their program, 1 set of 6 with 30 kilos, 1 set of 6 or 1 set of 7 with 30 kilos, both around the 1 rep in reserve mark, and then 1 set of 12 with 25 kilos, I think we said, with 1 rep in reserve. And what that allows them to do is the following week, they can go into the gym and they can say, oh, okay, that 3rd set, I dropped down to 25 kilos and I actually got 13 repetitions or 12 repetitions when I'm really aiming for 10. So I'll just go heavier. I'll just use the 27.5 kilo dumbbells. So it gives you something to aim for. But like I said, what matters in the moment, what matters in the set, is that you take it very close to muscular failure. The sets and reps you do will also be influenced by the rest of your training program. They'll also be influenced by how much time you have to train. For instance, if you've only got 45 minutes to go to the gym, you're probably not going to have every single set be in the 15 to 20 rep range because A, each set is going to take slightly longer to perform, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but if you're doing 10 sets across a workout at a minimum, I suppose, and each set takes an extra 30 seconds because you're doing really high repetitions, then you've added 5 minutes of work on. High rep sets tend to take a little bit longer to recover from sometimes as well because your heart rate's going to be a bit more elevated, you might have accumulated a bit more fatigue, and so you might rest for 2.5 minutes rather than 2 minutes. And so if you're pressed for time, I would probably go with the lower repetitions. Another consideration is where is the exercise in sequence? What is the order? Because if you've done a bunch of upper body work for an hour of a gym session and you get to the tail end of a workout, I think it's unrealistic. You're going to be really maxing out on sets of 5, 6, 7, and 8. You're probably going to be in a position where you're a bit more fatigued, you're a bit more tired, so you might go with a lighter weight and higher repetitions. Again, still getting very close to or to muscular failure if your goal is to build muscle. But the major point I'm trying to reinforce here is that the sets and reps matter far less than you think. The aim shouldn't be to do 3 sets of 12. The aim should be to do 3 sets where each set is taken very close to or to muscular failure. I know I'm repeating myself over and over again. Now that might mean for the first set you hit 12, and then the second and third set you use the same weight, your muscles are fatigued, maybe you hit 10 on the next one and 9 on the next one. That's fine. You didn't fail by not managing to hit 3 sets of 12. In fact, weirdly enough, the gym, exercise, strength training, failing is succeeding in a way. If you did 3 sets of 12 and you wrote that on your program, to me, that probably indicates that you aren't training as hard as you could. Because it means that if the third set of 12 was to muscular failure, then the first set was probably quite comfortable. The second set was moderately challenging, and the third set was the one that counted the most. Whereas actually having a drop off of repetitions, just a little bit, not massively, is a good indicator that each set was probably pretty tough. Your job in the gym, if you're building muscle, your task, your goal, your aim is to essentially accumulate as many good sets as possible, and a set is judged by how close you get to muscular failure. That's basically it. Everything else is going to come down to preference. How do you feel doing higher repetitions with certain exercises? How do you feel about doing lower repetitions with certain exercises? How much time do you have at the gym? How does that exercise feel after you've done a bunch of exercises beforehand? Is it the first exercise in your program? Is it the last exercise on that day? What else have you done that week? If you did lower repetition work for that muscle group on a Monday and you're going back in on Friday and doing the same muscle groups with different exercises, is it worth doing higher repetitions? How do your joints feel doing lower repetitions with a specific exercise? If you're doing a leg extension, for instance, for your quads, do lower repetitions make your knees ache a little bit? Cool, that's fine. That's probably pretty normal. Do high reps. And then all you need to do is you need to make a note of the sets and the reps and the weight that you're using. Make a little note of how close you got to failure. You know, did you have 1 rep in the tank or 2, or did you get to absolute muscular failure? And then each week you can then just make those tweaks and adjustments as needed. And that's all the training process really is. It's all I do for my, well, it's not all I do for my clients, but it's one of my main jobs to assess and look at their metrics. So I can see, right, last week you did this amount of weight. So this week, I think you probably got an extra 5 kilos in the tank. So on this exercise for this set, I want you to use 65 kilos rather than 60. Oh, look, it says that last week you did a set of 10 with this weight on your squats, but you had a couple of reps in the tank. I reckon we can go for an extra repetition. So I want you to do 11 or 12 reps. That's your goal. That's your aim with that set. You need sets and reps to give you a starting point or to give you something to aim for, to create some guidelines, but you just need to remember they're not rules. There's nothing magical about a specific number of sets or reps, and you definitely shouldn't stop a set just because you hit that number.